So in this last video, I just wanted to wrap up the rest of the game by going through the fight command. So one of the things we need to keep in mind is that there are two conditions in which we can fight. One is that the room contains a monster, and two, that we have a sword. And if we try to fight a monster without a sword, we're going to die. So there's a lot of things going on here. So let's write the first set of conditions that check to see if we have a sword and if there's a monster inside the room. So let's just start off. If current floor, current room, equals monster. We can start off with that because if the current floor, current room has a monster, we're going to fight the monster. And then otherwise, we can write the else. We can print, sorry, there is no monster here. So that'll just check right off the bat to see if there's a monster in the room. And if there's no monster, we'll tell the person there's no monster. You can't fight here. All right. And then if there's a monster, we want to do a couple things depending on our equipment. And just really quick, before we move on, I just saw a mistake here. Two equal signs if current floor, current room equals monster. So then we want to see what happens if there is a room, if there is a monster in the room. And if there's a monster in the room, we want to be able to fight it if we have a sword in our backpack. So we want to write if, and then we want to check to see if there's a sword in our backpack. So we could do that using the in command. We could do something of the sort of if sword in, and I believe my backpack is called backpack. So this literally reads if sword is an item in backpack. And so this will check to see if sword is in our backpack. And before we go ahead and write this, I'll just put pass here. We can write the else statement for this as well. If there's no sword in our backpack and we go to fight the monster, we're going to die. So you can see up at the top, we made a couple variables that track whether or not the player is alive. So one of the things we might want to do is if we tried to fight a monster and we don't have a sword in our backpack, we're going to set that variable. It's player alive is equal to, and then we can set it equal to false. So if we go to fight and there is, we go to fight a monster, there's no sword in our backpack, we will die. So player alive equals false. Let me just check, get player alive. Player alive equals false. And remember that our while loop up here runs when player alive is true. So once we set it to false, the loop will stop running, and the game would be over. All right. So if there is a sword in our backpack, we need to actually do two things. So the first thing we need to do is we need to kill the monster. So we could just do something quick like print out, you stab the sword with you. You stab the sword. You stab the monster with your sword. He is dead. All right. So that'll print out that we kill the monster. Now we actually need to remove the monster from the room. So remember, monster is just the item that's stored in the list of current floor, current room, that indexed item of the thing. So if we just want to change that item, we could just go current floor, current room now equals nothing. So that would essentially take the monster out of the room, replacing the monster with nothing. The other thing we have to do is every time we use a sword, it gets used up. So we need to actually go ahead and remove the sword from our backpack. So to do that, what we need to do is we need to delete the item from our backpack. And we can do that a couple different ways. a couple methods that are in or are usable on lists. The easiest one would be .remove. So if we just go backpack.remove, and we just want to remove the item sword, in quotes, and boom. This will remove the item sword from backpack. And what's great about .remove is it will just remove the first instance of sword. So if we have 2 swords in our backpack, it'll just delete the first one, and it will leave all the others there. So that way, we're only using one sword at a time. So if the sword's in our backpack, we're going to stab the monster. He'll die. We'll change the room to have nothing, and then we'll take a sword out of our backpack. Otherwise, we'll die. And if there's no monster, we'll print there's no monster here. So this should work now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and grab a sword, and then I'm going to go ahead and try to fight a monster. So let's see if all this works. Hopefully. So first thing I'm going to have to do, whoops, that's not how you do it. First thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to move right, and I'm going to go down, and I'm going to grab the sword, and now I'm going to go left, I'm going to go up, and then I'm going to go right, and then I'm going to go right. Inside the room is a monster. What would you like to do? I'd like to fight. And you stab the monster with the sword. He is dead. Inside a room. What would you like to do? There's nothing inside the room. It's perfect. We defeated the monster, replaced him with nothing. Now, a few more things that we might want to do to finish up our game. We do have one room labeled boss. And so boss, we can only fight him if we have the magic swords. The magic stones. So in that case, we're going to have just one more elif statement after this if statement. So this if statement checks to see if the current floor, current room is monster. We can add an elif statement that checks to see if current floor, current room is boss. And then we can go ahead and we can write what it looks like to fight the boss. It's going to be pretty much exactly similar, except actually, and I'm just going to copy and paste this code actually, because we are going to pretty much do the exact same thing. The only thing is we now have 2 conditions in which we can fight the boss. The first one is that our sword is in our backpack, and the second one is that the magic stones are in our backpack. So if so we also want an and statement, and magic stones in backpack. So you fight the boss with your sword and magic. He is dead. We could still go ahead and destroy the boss. We just also need to remove backpack. Remove magic stones. So now the magic stones are gone from the backpack. There's one other thing we want to do. Remember, once we defeat the final boss, we win the game. So we also have another variable that's tracking to see if we win the game. And that's player 1. And so now, once we beat the boss, we can set player 1 to true. Oops, that's the monster. We want the boss. So player 1 equals true. And again, if we try to fight the boss and we lose, we die. Now, all of this is pretty much our game. I haven't written the instructions for help, but that will just be a print statement that says all the commands. One other thing we want to add is our loop is going to repeat until we either defeat the boss or we die. So we can just at the bottom of our loop here. So this whole thing is our while loop. We can actually condense this and just hide it. So right after our entire while loop, what we can do is we can just write an if statement that checks to see whether or not we've won and says, congrats, you win. So if player won, and we could actually just leave it if player won, because this would mean that player one is true, and it starts off false, and it only changes to true if we beat the game. Say print congrats on beating the boss. You win the game. We can also do another if statement. If player alive equals false, that would mean that the player died. We can also do print sorry, you have been defeated. Better luck next time. So then these two statements will print out appropriately at the end of the game. If they've won the game, we'll say congrats, you won the game. If they lose the game, we'll say sorry, you've been defeated. Better luck next time. All that will happen after our loop is done running. That's pretty much it for our game. There's one other component that I'm going to add in to this video just to make it a little more interesting. One of the things that you can do is that what happens when you go into a room and there's a monster there and you don't have a sword? What can you do? And so right now you can still move left and right out of that room. So one thing we might want to make a little more interesting is that, let's say, if you try to type left or right and you're in the room with a monster, let's just give you like a certain percentage chance that you can escape the room. So let's go ahead and write that. And all it is for our left and for our right commands, we're just going to add another option. So you can see here, if current room equals 0, we say you can't move left, there's a wall there. Otherwise, let you move left. Let's add another condition right here that goes, if current floor current room if current floor current room equals monster, then let's set it up so you have a certain percentage chance of escaping. So we could do something like this. We'll print out, you try to run away from the monster. And then what we'll do is we'll use a random number generator to determine whether or not you run away from the monster. So we'll need to pick a random number and see if that random number is greater than or equal to something. That'll be our percentage chance. And then depending on that, we either change the room or we die. So in order to do this, we're actually going to need to, in order to generate random numbers, we're going to need the library random. So at the top of our program, we're just going to type import random, and this gives us all the functions that come with the random library. So with the random library imported, then we can head back down here, and we can then generate a random number. So if we try to run away from the monster, we're going to generate a random number. We're going to generate that in another if statement. And depending on the result of this random number, we're going to do one of two things, which is why we need this if statement. We will go if random dot randint, and then randint takes two arguments that are a range of intervals or integers. So we can do something like 0 to 1. And if that number is greater than 0, which means it's 1 because it can either only be 0 or 1, so you have a 50-50 chance of escaping the monster. If that number is greater than 0, print you successfully run away from the monster. What happens if that number isn't greater than 0? That means it was the 0. We can do the else and then say print the monster stabs you before you can get away. And then each of these will need the conditions associated with them. So because I wrote this in the move left command, we're just going to do current room is now equal to current room -1. If the monster stabs us, then all we're going to do is we're going to set player alive equal to false. And then the same code is pretty much going to go. I'm just going to put that under there. The same code is pretty much going to go for right. We'll just change the number to -1 to +1. So we'll go ahead and we'll stick this in the right. So there we go. If current room has a monster, flip a coin and we'll add 1. So now, hopefully with that, we can run away from the monster. We could easily change these numbers to give us more interesting percentages. So say if we wanted to have, like, say, a 60% chance, we could do a number between, say, 0 and 10, and just say, hey, if it's greater than 4, you can run away. So that would give you a 60% chance if we did 0 to 10 greater than 4. So you get to pick the number here that you want. If you want it to have a 50% chance, 1 out of 2, so you flip a coin. 60% chance, we could do that. So you can pick the percentage here, and that'll pick a random number every time, and just see if it's greater than or less than 4.